Turmoil in Chicago. It's not elementary for dear Watson, and buying and selling the best storylines in the NFL. We got all that and more. I'm Jason Fitz, and it's time for Inside Coverage. I'm Jason Fitz, hanging out with Charles Robinson, Jori, Epstein, Yahoo Sports senior NFL reporters. Guys, it's time for Inside Coverage, and I want to be professional. You guys are professional. But right off the top, I'm just going to take us off the rails. I need somebody to explain to me what the hell is going on in Chicago. Because, Jori, it feels like every time I open up any sort of a app, anytime I read anything right now, there is some sort of drama happening around Justin Fields, happening around the Bears. Like, it feels like it's total chaos.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let C-Rob speak to a lot of this, but I will say that clip of Justin Fields' interview today, it was definitely surprising that, I mean, look, every quarterback has a different approach, but when you think about Deshaun Watson, who we will get to in the game he had, if you listen to his press conference afterwards, the entire press conference, he's saying, I need to be better. I told the team I'll be better. This is my responsibility. I take accountability. Whatever you think about his off the field stance, that was what he was saying after the game. And then you go to the Justin Fields press conference and they're saying what was wrong. And he's talking about how much is on his mind, how it's slowing him down from playing fast. And they said, what's wrong? And he said, coaching. And the reporters kind of gave him a chance for an out, which was, or are there too many voices in your head? And he was like, no, I don't think it's too many voices in my head. And he was just sort of implying that he felt like the coaches were asking him to do something that wasn't in line with the way he usually plays, which maybe they are, and maybe they need to figure that out. But I think that was what the Bears talked about this offseason was he is going to develop as a passer. He's not just going to be rushing in this way that's really risky for his long-term career. And that has not worked through the first couple of weeks of the season. So, C-Rob, what do you think of all of this?
Well, I think it was noticeable that there was already a change in Fields in terms of what they were asking him to do. I actually had a GM I was talking to after the week one. He was like, where were you at? I said, I went to Chicago when I watched Fields and Love. And the first thing he said to me was, it's clear they've asked him not to run. It's clear that they've asked him to try to operate from the pocket, make that offense work from the pocket. They're like, because if you go back and watch that game, he does not look like he had that mentality he had the second half of last season, which was make big plays happen. If the first read isn't there, start looking for the big play. I think that's what they spent a lot of the offseason on, which was we're going to build the offense around you. We're going to go and pick you up a number one receiver in DJ Moore. We want you to try and function from the pocket because if you keep playing like you did in the second half of last season, you're going to get hurt. And we have to functionally make that basically really a secondary part of your game, not I'm going to read, first read here and I'm automatically thinking about now how can I make the big play by moving. And so I think what Fields came out and said today was just being told a lot of things that are moving me away from what my natural ability is, what my natural sense of how to play football is. And what I think is really remarkable about this, it was an extremely similar moment to years ago. I remember going into Philly. It was not working with Carson Wentz. He was making all kinds of mistakes. They had worked the entire offseason to work on his delivery, his footwork, his mechanics, his decision-making. And what I heard was from Wentz's camp, they're overcoaching. Like there's too much. They've got too many cooks in the kitchen. You got a head coach who is an ex-QB. You got an offensive coordinator who's an ex-QB. You got a quarterbacks coach who's an ex-QB. And they're all telling him these different things to focus on. And then Carson goes out there and feels overwhelmed, feels like he can't be himself, feels like, and this was the word that I picked up on, a robot. He feels like a robot out there. He has to be able to just go and play naturally. Obviously, that didn't play out well. It didn't play out well for Carson in Philly. Didn't play out well for Carson in Indy. Didn't play out well for Carson in Washington. I hope that's not where this is going with Fields, but it definitely raised a red flag for me to hear Fields basically say, I feel like I'm a robot. I'm not playing the way I need to be playing football.
So I want to chime in here with a weird analogy. Follow me for a second here, though. You guys know my music background. And I would say that when I was doing what I was doing musically, I was one of the best at what I did. Like I was one of the best sort of rock country fiddle players in the world. I say that with a lot of humility, but I can't play a lick of bluegrass. Like I am the worst. You give me a bluegrass song and I can't play it for my life, right? And I always thought, like I'm a classical music kid that turned into a rock fiddle kid. Like I say that because I look at this all the time, and the more I talk to former players, I always say system matters, right? The way what they're asked to do matters. Like, if you had put me in a bluegrass band, everybody would have walked in and said, man, I don't know if the band's any good, but I know the fiddle player sucks. When I was in a different type of band, you look at it, people walk away, they'd be like, man, fiddle player's great, right? Like, At some point in life, I want every coach to be chopped. I want you to open up the basket of ingredients, see what you got to work with, and work with it. And what's happening right now is they're looking at Justin Fields and they're like, well, we want him to be this. He's not. Like, let him be who he's going to be. It drives me crazy because we label bust all the time. I see you putting your hand up. See, Rob, I just had to make the quick analogy, as weird as it is.
Well, and I think you hit on something because
that rock fiddle kids exist. I have not heard that before, but continue.
You're welcome.
Shane Steichen is the guy who figured this out with Jalen Hurts in Philly. Okay, like it's you have to have a coach who can sit there and go, yeah, there's a depreciating aspect of this part of his game, which is running, which we really, we're nervous about. We don't want him to continue to do this functionally. We can't have him run the ball 15 times a game. He will eventually get hurt, as he did last season. But you figure out a way to augment the game, still give him that option, that opportunity, but work him into the fundamental ability to be a core passer. You add a number one receiver, you draft a number two receiver, you have a high-end tight end, you have a really good offensive line. That's how they accomplished that in Philly on top of the coaching. Now, Chicago, you can question how good, do they have a really good offensive line? They did add offensive pieces. Are they anywhere near where they need to be? And how sudden was this change? Like, did they just try to flip a switch with him over the course of the offseason and say, take it away, don't do it, which is how it looked in week one, at least to this general manager that I talked to? Or did they say, we're going to smooth you into this process. We're going to make it happen over time. We're not going to expect to take this away from you right away. I can't speak to it, being inside that organization. Obviously, they know better than I do, but it was clear that off the bat, he was trying to do something that was very dissimilar to the style he played over the course of down the stretch last season, when we looked at him and said, wow, that looks like the Fields that was drafted in the top 10 picks.
And it's just intriguing because you want to ask yourself, what was Justin Fields showing during OTAs and training camp that led coaches to think what he is or isn't doing was the best thing for them going into week one of the regular season? How much of this did they figure out? Was he saying during the offseason, hey, like, this doesn't feel right? Or as some coaches told me, I sat down with Luke Getz, their offensive coordinator, when I went out there, and he was saying, like, the way that Justin is able to talk about the offense, to anticipate plays, to say, like, here's what I should be doing in this situation, here's how I'm going to do it, is a different place. And then all of a sudden you get out there with the defense and it just doesn't feel right. I also think that there's a sense that the Bears need to be honest to themselves about where they are in this rebuilding process. And so, yes, they have a better offensive line than last year. Yes, they have a better receiving core than last year, but they're not there yet. And they still have a lot of pieces on both sides of the ball that aren't necessarily competitive with a lot of the teams they're going to go up against. And so what are you asking your quarterback to do, and how does that fit in? But I still think, on one hand, as reporters, we want guys to be transparent. We want them to be honest. I don't want the sanitized interview. But on the other hand, what benefit does it bring the Bears and Justin Fields for him to say coaching in the press conference? And I'm really curious if they plan to do that going in. And also, you mentioned the Shane Steichen situation. Okay, yes, with the Eagles, or I guess even pre-Shane Steichen, with the Eagles and Carson Wentz, you had a head coach, offensive coordinator, quarterback. They have a defensive head coach in Chicago. So this is really Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator. This is not too many voices. And if you have a problem with Luke Getsy, you should probably talk to him directly about it.
I know we got to move on. I don't disagree with anything you just said, but there may not be any benefit. But I also look at it like sometimes the human element. Like, if you believe that you're good at what you do, and every time you stand in front of a microphone, somebody tells you you're not, at some point, if you believe that the coaches are holding you back, I think that a lot of athletes, a lot of people have a breaking point. And I don't care if somebody listening, like, makes spreadsheets and all of a sudden they're being asked to use a different application to make those spreadsheets, and somebody comes in every day and says, well, your spreadsheets suck. At some point, you're going to look at it and be like, hey, my spreadsheets suck because this idiot's making me use this application for it, right? Like, at some point, you stand up for yourself. And I don't know if Justin Fields, I don't know if he's at that breaking point, and we don't.
Do you think his teammates view it that way?
Oh,
that's a good question.
That's the $1 million question, right? Because if they don't, then he's just created a storm, a you-know-what storm that in that locker room. Like, we got a lot of drama to get to from Chicago, including what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. We will we will get there. But that's not the only big story. I have to get some thoughts on from you guys. Obviously, a lot to cover. But not the least of which is that the Chiefs sign a mega deal, like a massive deal for Patrick Mahomes. We all expected this at some point. It's a restructuring that gives him $210 million over a 3-year period. Make me smart, guys. Like, because when I'm looking at this, Jori, I see a bunch of money and I have no idea what it really means. So when you see that money go out, what does it say to you?
Yeah, it's funny because I texted Sierra when this came out, and I'm like, anyone who has to try and convince us like this hard that something good is happening, like, what are you hiding here? But I think what the reality is, there's a few things that teams and players look for when they're doing a quarterback deal. There is how much money are they making? What's the average annual value per year, which is often what we think about when we think about who's the highest paid. And then there's the structure of the deal. How much of this deal is guaranteed? What does that get? Is it guaranteed fully? Is it guaranteed for injury? Is it a roster guarantee, but they're likely to get it? And then there's also this idea of what's the life of the deal? And so when are they going to get back to the negotiating table? For a player, it's often better to have a 4-year deal. For a team, it's better to have your quarterback for 5 or more, because then you can get the more roster flexibility and you have their rights. And so when they're saying like this is the most money over this 4-year period, they're trying to differentiate that, yes, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow just signed these crazy 5-year deals. That's not what the comparison here is. It's over the course of 4 years. But still, when I think about it, I think that, yes, Mahomes is closer to getting compensated what the market value would probably reflect he's worth. The Chiefs are still like winning in the sense of like he's not trying to reset the market, and they have flexibility both in terms of the length of contract and not paying him number one rate in the market when he is the number one quarterback in the market. So that is how I view all of what is going on.
They just redid the 10-year deal that they did before. I mean, that's to me, when you initially looked at the 10-year deal that they did, everyone, when you talk to the Asian community, like even the ones that were rolling their eyes saying, what a dumb thing to do. Why lock yourself into 10 years? Fine, they're rolling guarantees. It's really hard to just cut them if something bad happens. They all agreed you're going to get about 3-4 years into this deal, especially after the TV money comes in. You're going to have to go back to the table here. I think the big takeaway for me with the Chiefs and Mahomes is that he will probably renegotiate as the market moves, especially if it moves the way that it did the quarterback market in the last 3 to 4 years. They'll continue to renegotiate about every 4 years, and they'll tack on another 4-year window. I don't want to get, caught in the overall length of the deal. How long does it go to the end? I think what Jori hit on is what really people should be concerned with. When do they go back to the table? I think it's stapled on now to the Chiefs franchise and Mahomes. Every 4 years, depending on how that quarterback market moves, I would expect them to go back to the deal, lengthen another 4-year window on. So in a way, they're giving you the big window, and they're telling you what the totality is. But I do think they tried to skinny it down to say, look, just focus on the 4 years. Here's the 4 years. When we get to a period there where we need to renegotiate again, we're going to tack on another 4 years. He's going to live in 4-year increments, which, as Jori said, quarterbacks and agents, that's how they try to live nowadays, in 4-year increments with these extensions. Nobody expects to, sign the old school 7-year deals and actually make it to the end of that 7-year run. Another takeaway I would have here is Mahomes is working with them in a sense. He's continuing to work with them in terms of, as Jori said, not saying, I got to reset the market. I would expect they'll continue to augment his deals. They move, down the line, moving money around to add pieces. And eventually, at the end of his career, which should be a long time from now, you're going to have a bunch of dead drop years. They're going to sign some kind of deal to free up some money, and there's going to be 3 voidable years on the end of that deal when Mahomes' career ends with the Chiefs. They're going to take an asteroid hit in the cap, because all that money will accelerate at the end. But you don't worry about that now. By then, you would think the roster would have been worn out. Maybe you've won 5 titles, whatever. It's all about the player who's the best guy in football, who's going to be probably the next Tom Brady, if not exceed that, showing the Tom Brady-ish. I think Tom Brady was far more underpaid than Mahomes, but the Tom Brady-ish willingness to work with the front office and continually revisit this deal as his career expands.
I mean, you say underpay or take a deal. I'll say this: no matter what money Patrick Mahomes ever gets, he's underpaid. Like, as good as he is, no matter how much they pay him, it's under. And then the other part of this is every time a fan base says we can't pay your quarterback and still win, the problem isn't that you paid your quarterback. The problem is your quarterback's not Patrick Mahomes, because the Chiefs are proving over and over again, you got Patrick Mahomes, you can keep paying your quarterback. You'll figure out the rest of the round. The problem isn't paying your quarterback. The problem is that you're paying quarterback and your quarterback isn't Patrick Mahomes, which is why I drink every Sunday, guys. Like, this is just going to be my personal hell for the next 15 years. Okay, so speaking of personal hell, the Browns fans, I should say, are feeling that right now. Like, they are just. I was sitting. I was at a little sports bar having a good time, like sitting next to this, like, just the sweetest little old lady, and like, I mean, she was little and frail, right? She's sitting in the chair, and I'm looking down at my phone, and I luckily I didn't see the injury everybody else saw, but all of a sudden this little old lady screams, "Son of a!" in the middle of the bar, and I'm like, what happened? And I look up, Chubb's on the ground. So, Nick Chubb, obviously, with the catastrophic injury that has Browns fans rocked, has everybody stepping back, and obviously, in this point, heartbroken for a player that looked spectacular. But it puts a lot of pressure at this point on Deshaun Watson, because, C-Rob, like, Deshaun Watson has not looked good. We've covered this on every one of the shows on Yahoo Sports over the first few weeks of the season. They might be winning football games, but Deshaun Watson doesn't look right.
He is now at the point where he's got to be the guy. They're bringing in Kareem Hunt. That's fine. There's some familiarity there. I can tell you the reason why they didn't, bring Kareem Hunt back, at least initially, is because they felt like his skills had diminished a bit. But what overcomes that? Knowing the system in a pinch, being able to come in and immediately operate the offense, and knowing that you'll just platoon two backs situationally and ride a hot hand, which is what they're going to end up doing with that backfield. But Watson, there's some concern. There's definitely some concern. And I actually spent some time I'm here in Houston, talking to people here in Houston who are familiar with this game. I was texting with people during Monday Night Football. And the takeaway was, like, something looks wrong with him. Like, he's not playing in a similar fashion to where he did when he was at his peak with the Houston Texans. And, one person said to me, I thought it was kind of interesting. He's like, man, there's just this mentality. Some of the things he's doing out there right now, the face mask penalties, the pushing the ref to the side, the slamming the ball into the wall after he scored a touchdown, which looked less celebratory than angry. Just overall, sort of the sense of how he's playing looks different than how he played with the Texans, even when he was getting sacked a bazillion times with the Texans, by the way. So I think there's a few different things that play into this. I think there's a lot of play action in this offense. And this is when I was talking to somebody who had done a lot of advanced work on Watson in the past, and then eyed him again when he was available on the trade market. He ran a lot of shotgun offense in Houston where things are in front of him. There are times he's running empty backfields, but he can kind of see everything unfolding in front of him. Whereas in Stefanski's offense, there's a lot of play action. He's got to turn his back on the defense at times. And if he's operating a beat slow, which seems to be what some people think, is that he's just a little beat slow right now, he's not always catching up to everything the second he turns around. But that's not all on him. The TJ Watt strip sack, I don't know what he could have done there. I mean, he literally had about a second in the pocket before he had to make something happen. He gets hit, loses the ball. Ball security's on him. But again, that's a problem. The offensive line is a problem right now. Harrison Bryant, he hits him the first pick six of the game. Harrison Bryant clearly sat down on the route. Watson looked like he thought he was going to continue to progress through it. It hits Bryant's hands. You can't have a ball hit your hands and let it get, even if it was a bad pass, you can't let it get deflected up in the air, gets returned for a pick six. I mean, I will agree with Kevin Stefanski in the sense that there are a lot of things going on right now that are leaning into this, and Watson's going to catch hell for most of it. But he is definitely a piece of it right now. He is not the player yet that he was with the Houston Texans. And I think that is the frustration that is starting to catch up to this situation, is that people are like, if he's still out of sync, if there's still rust there, how long is this timeline go? Like, how many more seasons do we have to wait for him to click back into that player? And will that actually ever happen?
Yes, Rob, that's what I'm wondering is, what do you both think that it will take for Deshaun to get back to that player? I mean, is it 3 or 4 games you knock off the rust? Is it that, hey, you take 2 years off, you're not getting back to where you were? Is it, well, now that you don't have Nick Chubb, you're going to always feel like you need to do too much, even if you have a defense that's really strong? How do they change this?
Let's talk about a significant reality here. Mentally, he is no longer accepted socially, outwardly, as the player he was once before, which was squeaky clean, perfect, this guy who can be held up a centerpiece of the league moving forward from a PR standpoint. He is literally on the opposite side of that scale forever. And so does that have a mental impact on him? And is that weighing on him in some way, shape, or form, right? Is there a deeper confidence issue that we're talking about here? Troy Aikman did him no favors during the broadcast, right? Because at one point he says there's a member of Deshaun Watson's team, and he kind of mentioned Watson like meditating or visualizing success.
Oh, they showed it on the broadcast.
They actually showed it on the broadcast. They played that pregame clip during this last drive after the strip sack fumble, where it's like, okay, now Watson's got to lead them to a win here late in the fourth quarter. Well, they play that clip. Aikman kind of laughs when he's talking about Watson needing to, going through this visualization effort in the pregame or whatever. I don't know if he meant to make it look how it came off on the broadcast, but it didn't do Watson any favors. I mean, it's like, it's just another thing that people are staring at going like, is there a confidence issue here? Is he's making the face masks and the pushing the ref aside and some of the other things we're seeing? Is there some kind of mental issue that's going on right here that's causing him to play frustrated? Is he just having a tough time with the protection? It's a whole web of things. And when you say, how do you resolve that? I don't know. I mean, I guess start with the offensive line and protect him as best you can for the player he is now, which you would think play action helps to protect him in that. But you can't run play action and have him get strip sacked a second. That was a play action play, right? Highsmith comes off. He's there. There's nothing Watson can do about it at that point. And TJ Watt runs the ball in for a touchdown. Other than hanging on to the ball, I think he was getting hammered regardless in that situation. The tackle was beaten so badly on that play. Fix that first.
Deshaun Watson, the football player we're talking about here with the Texans, was a top 5 quarterback at one point in the NFL, and that was very clear. Now, as he tries to come out of whatever this is, he's got to deal with the pressure that comes with it, the eyeballs that come with it, the opinions that come with it, all while he puts this on himself, all while he doesn't get a ton of benefit of the doubt for obvious reasons from a lot of people. And that's just talking about the football player. I don't know how you fix the mentals that come with that. And, there's certainly an argument to be made that whatever world he's living in is the world that he created. But if you're asking how he gets out of that world, I don't know. Because I think right now he looks washed. I mean, Deshaun just doesn't, he looks washed.
We're 2+ seasons from him being that top 5 quarterback, right? Okay. We're over 2 years it's been since him being that top 5 quarterback. That's a long time. Okay. You get to 3 years and you start to question, okay, maybe he's just not on that level anymore. And, I think Jori and I at one point were talking about it on the phone where I was just like, you're asking other people to make comparisons here. And, someone said to me, well, it's different. They're different players, different styles, different body types. But like, Dante Culpepper, once he suffered that knee injury, it effectively changed a career that looked like it was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And then he was just never the same after that for a multitude of different reasons. And I think the point was, you just don't know how a kind of life-changing event or injury, whether it's football or off the field, is ultimately going to impact the trajectory of a player. We all assumed he was going to go back to being the player he was in Houston. Right now is a poor assumption.
It feels like there's a lot of chaos happening right now. Chaos is the theme for this week. When we come back, we'll get into chaos in Chicago, contenders that look more like pretenders as we buy or sell, I should say, some of the best moments from coaches and players across the league this week. Welcome back to Inside Coverage. Charles Robinson, Jori Epstein. I'm Jason Fitz. They are your senior NFL Yahoo reporters. I'm your Yahoo in front of a microphone trying to get us through all of this. Guys, we're going to have a little bit of fun together, okay? We're going to do a little buy or sell. And here's the way this is going to run. We've heard from some of the coaches and players that have given us takes throughout the course of the week. So we'll cue it up. We'll listen to what they have to say. And I'm going to ask you a buy or sell statement on the other side of it. We will start with Brandon Staley. I think every time that there's controversy around the Chargers, people love talking about Brandon Staley. This is what he had to say about whether last year's playoff loss is still in the minds of the Chargers.
I'm not worried about the Jacksonville loss. The Jacksonville loss hasn't carried on to the season whatsoever. If you've seen our training camp or you've seen the way we've played in the first 2 games, it hasn't had an impact on our team whatsoever. Our team is connected. Our team has played its heart out in 2 games, and we've lost 2 tough games. But it has nothing to do with the Jacksonville game. And if you ask anyone in our locker room, it has nothing to do with the Jacksonville game. And that's just the truth. It's a convenient storyline for you and for everybody else, but it's not the truth. We've lost 2 tough games, but the guys in that locker room, the men in that locker room, they are finishers and they have what it takes, and we're excited to prove ourselves.
All right, Jori, are you buying or selling that the Jacksonville loss is not carrying over into this season?
Look, do I think that that is the main reason they're losing? No. His defense is currently 30th in terms of points allowed, last in the league in terms of yards allowed. And last year, they weren't much better. They were 21st and 20th, and he was hired to come in and make this defense revolutionary. And so if you have Justin Herbert playing in the way that he needs to, and this offense doing it, and the defense isn't, yeah, maybe it's not specifically about the playoffs, but maybe the same issues that were hurting them in past seasons are hurting them now. And I'll also say, I just feel like since 2020, last several years, we just hear so many coaches, you guys aren't telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. The media narrative is this. That's not our narrative. And anytime you tell me that, first of all, you just sound ridiculous. Like, why do you need to convince me of that? And second of all, like, why don't we work together to tell what you think is a story if you think it's something else? Why are you being like, oh, you're telling the fake news? Well, you're the one whose defense is giving up all these points and yards. Is that fake too?
All right, look, I'm going to sell Jori's commitment to the format of this segment because, by the way, if you didn't know, that was Jori selling. Okay, she does not believe what Brandon Staley is dishing out. She's selling. I am also a seller. I saw that clip. Brandon Staley's demeanor looked tense. He looked irritated. That is not his stock and trade as a head coach in the NFL. Okay, it's not good that you're 2 games in and you're already pissy, tense, and irritated when you're at a microphone. But I think there is a reason for that. And as Jori said, part of this is the defensive woes. You can't continually be a defensive head coach, have defensive talent, and yet rank poor in the NFL when it comes to aspects of whether it's scoring or yardage or whatever else. You can say all you want about injuries. You got to figure out a way to ultimately overcome that and play into what your forte is as a head coach. But to me, look, when you have Keenan Allen come out and say something's missing, that's it. That's a statement. That's Justin Fields saying coaching. Okay, you can't say coaching in the NFL when you're at a microphone, and you can't say something's missing into a microphone when you're now 0-2. Their last 4 games, I think they've all lost by 3 points or less. You know, you just there's an inability to break through when it matters. Okay, for the Chargers. And is Staley on the hot seat? Yeah, he's on the hot seat because there's too much talent on this roster, both offensively and defensively, to feel like the same things are happening repetitively. And it's a very convenient narrative for a coach to coin the phrase convenient narrative and then point to the media when it comes to, yeah, last season doesn't have anything to do with this season. Yeah, our last bad loss doesn't have anything to do with this. That's bull. And by the way, it's absolutely false when you get coaches in honest moments or you get GMs in honest moments. They will tell you, yes, there is a hangover from certain big events that happened the prior season. Sometimes it's an injury. Sometimes it's a bad loss. Sometimes it's just the general malaise of the direction of the franchise. You go into the next season and you're like, hey, we had a great camp. We had great OTAs. We had great this. We had great that. We're healthy. And then you come out of the gate looking like what you were the year before. Institutional memory kicks in. Players are like, here we go again. Like, are we doing this again? Or are we going to get over this? So I like Brandon Staley. I've been a proponent of him. I love his press conferences. But yeah, to me, this is really concerning. And that guy at that microphone in that clip is a distant memory from the guy in season 1 when we're all like, greatest press conferences ever. You pointing at the media? Yeah, we're getting off that.
No, I think 2 things. One, anytime I hear coaches blaming someone else, I think that they are not sending the accountability message that their players need to hear. I had this with the Cowboys a couple of years ago when Mike McCarthy was blaming the refs and was like, oh yeah, the Dallas Cowboys, they're going to cause more penalties. Whether or not you believe that, if that's the message you're giving out, you're not holding your players responsible and you're not holding yourself responsible. And I think that Brandon Staley's accountability isn't exactly what you're looking for here. I also wonder if now with Kellen Moore at offensive coordinator rather than Joe Lombardi, does he feel more pressure that, hey, if things don't go well and there's this guy who has been getting head coaching interviews the last couple of years, that his ownership might be a little bit more quick to make a move? And, oh, by the way, maybe his players are a little quicker in trying to want that move. So I just think that you got to be careful when you start saying, like, you guys did this, not me. Well, soon enough, you might be out here with us, but if that's what we're talking about.
I'm buying Jori just saying that hey, Kellen Moore is going to be the next head coach of the Los Angeles.
And
I'm buying that too. Yeah. I'm buying that too.
I'm also not saying whether or not he should or shouldn't. I'm just saying, do I think that the pressure on Staley is different with do I think at least the public perception of who is the best candidate in-house to be head coach changes when you have Kellen Moore rather than Joe Lombardi? It does.
Yeah, definitely.
I just want to add two things here. Number one, the next time I hear a coach or GM say, boy, we had the worst camp, I cannot believe we're actually like just once. That'll be the first time I've ever heard it.
Fitz, every staff comes out of camp loving camp, right? Or loving the OTAs, right? Don't they all like?
Wait, I'm so glad you guys are talking about this because Mike McCarthy said the Cowboys had like the best Thursday practice before they played the Jets. And John Machota, who's one of the great Cowboys beat writers over there, asked Brian Schottenheimer after this. He was like, "Do you think that like a good practice actually matters?" And it's because for years he's always been like, what are we supposed to take from this? You're not going to tell us if it's bad or like if you lose, but then it's like, oh, can you bounce back? Yes, there's so many things. That
I want the weekly press conference for a coach to come in and be like, boy, we sucked all week long. I don't know how the hell we're going to get through this game. Like, I just want that once. And as much as Brandon Staley can sit here and say that the Jacksonville loss doesn't carry over, I think the one thing you guys have both alluded to that is really important here is that it's not just the Jacksonville loss. This is the identity at this point of who the Chargers are. They lose big games against good teams, and they lose them close. So, like, if I'm Brandon Staley, I'd much rather just accept that Jacksonville's part of it than have to come up and acknowledge the bigger point, because the bigger point here is that the Chargers lose this type of game over and over and over again. It's not just Jacksonville carrying over. It's the whole damn identity of how they do business. So, you know, I'm with all of you guys, and now I just want coaches to tell us that they suck. All right, let's get into speaking of sucks. A lot of people have a lot to say about the quarterback situation, obviously, for the Jets. But check out what Garrett Wilson had to say about how internally they're looking at Zach Wilson.
From the outside looking in, you know, it's easy to play the blame the quarterback game, and you know, honestly, that's the world we live in. You know, where you look at the top man, the head man, the quarterback, the one who makes the money, and then you point the finger. But you know, all of us internally know that we all got to get, you know, we all got to take the right steps and get better. Zach went out there and gave it his all today. You know, we got to make it easier on him. We got to paint better pictures for him. We got to hold up in protection better for him. We got to get open more. Just all that.
See, Rob, you buying that internally they are not blaming Zach Wilson?
I'm buying it. I talked to somebody there, and I said, look, just brass tacks it for me. Like, are we looking at a situation where, like what we just talked about with the Chargers, like, is this institutional memory of what Zach was? Has that already kicked in? And you're like, oh, God, here we go. This is going to slide downhill fast. And what I was told was, no, actually, because there's film that supports through 3 quarters, Zach Wilson actually played a decent game. You know, there were times where he was decisive. There were times where he took off running where that was the right read. And they're like, if you look at Dallas's defense, this coverage was excellent. They're like, the front end was basically unstoppable. They threw everything they could at Micah Parsons. And when they did that, they were getting beat by other players in the front 4. And then I said, well, what about the turnovers? I mean, the turnovers are really about as bad as they can be, right? And what I was told was flat out, like, no, like at that point, we were getting to like a desperate situation. Like Zach had to make a play. It was on him. We had to score. And this idea of running the ball at that point in the 4th, we were beyond it. He needed to force the issue. We knew he was forcing the issue. That's how those interceptions happened. It wasn't just a simple, you know, man, he's completely misreading the situation. They're like, if those interceptions had happened in the first quarter, that's 2022. They're like, that's like the wheels falling off immediately. That was last year. They said, you know, this time it was just being behind the 8 ball, needing the quarterback to get out there and be a little more risky and try to get the team back into the game. It did not break his way. And by the way, they also seem to respect Dallas as probably a Super Bowl contender this year, which I tend to agree with, having been at that game.
Jori, you buying or selling it?
Yeah, I'm buying it. I think that when you think about whether they're blaming the quarterback, think about whether that's helpful. What good does it do these guys to blame the quarterback, especially at this point in the season? When they started to mutiny against Zach Wilson last year, they had Mike White there. They had an option that they felt like was better enabling them to run the offense. They don't right now. I think Zach Wilson is a better player, if not a great player, than what they had last year. And yeah, there's some disappointment that they don't have Aaron Rodgers there. And we saw Aaron saying on that podcast, like, sorry, kid, to Garrett Wilson, or I guess Garrett Wilson reported that Aaron Rodgers said that. But it's in their best interest to try and work with this situation. And C-Rob makes a good point. Through 3 quarters, he's 7 of 14, 104 yards and a touchdown. It's not, or 106 yards. It's not great, but it's not like, oh, interceptions were the big problem. The last 2 came after the score was already 30-10. And it's the same thing when you see on the final play of the game, a team's down by 6 points and a guy throws a Hail Mary and the other team catches it. Well, now that's an interception on the record book. So I don't think he's what they want. I also think you have to ask questions to Nathaniel Hackett about, why did Breece Hall carry the ball 4 times for 9 yards a week after he had something like 140 yards from scrimmage on his first week back from the ACL? I get that a lot of that was on that 83-yard carry, but even if you got down, I think they maybe went away from the run a little more quickly than they should. Zach Wilson should not be your leading rusher on a team that has Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. And by the way, although the Cowboys haven't really showed it yet, I think the running defense is where their defense is weakest. They're not necessarily weak there, but it is where you have a chance to attack compared with the pass rush, especially when you have the pass protection issues that the Jets have. And so I think you have to ask the coaching, although again, here I'm bashing Justin Fields for calling out coaching, and I'm saying, well, maybe the coaching is the issue here, but I do think you have to look at the way the plays are called. And I think that'll be really interesting this week because the Jets are playing the Patriots. Bill Belichick is going to bring about as good a defensive plan as you can. And what's Nathaniel Hackett going to do in response?
And don't you think, too, when you talk about the running game, the fact that being there and sitting there watching it, and I know it wasn't remarkably effective, but I still think there would have been enough of a physical toll by the 4th quarter that maybe it would have slowed down that Dallas front a little bit when really everything kind of fell apart, for that Jets offensive line. I'm not saying the Jets could have run the ball better or more effectively, but I think that commitment takes a toll on the defense over the expanse of the game. And then maybe in the 4th quarter, when you go to play action, it seems a little more realistic in the 4th quarter if you've used Breece, to a maximum level up until that point. They have those running backs. I do think schematically there was a little bit of a letdown there too. So, I'm with Jori. I think it doesn't just fall on the player. It doesn't just fall on the scheme. Sometimes it falls on how the coach calls it too.
And if Nathaniel Hackett continues to sort of struggle with this quarterback, I think there'll be real questions about whether Nathaniel Hackett is like jelly. Nobody wants just a jelly sandwich. You need peanut butter and jelly to have that sandwich. Like maybe Aaron Rodgers is the peanut butter, and the only way that Nathaniel Hackett's play calling is really, edible is if it's also accompanied. You got to have the two of them together. Also, if we had the completely unique, never done before idea of scoring this show randomly and arbitrarily, I would tell you that, Jori, your point that there's no other quarterback that they're seeing in practice every day that they're falling in love with, they'd rather have play, might be that, like, it just, wow. That's just the thing that's just happened. Like, blew my mind, because you're totally right about that. It's not like they're sitting there in practice every day saying, wait, this guy's bad and this guy's good. So it has to change your perspective. Look, see, that's why really smart at what they do. All right, let's keep it going here, and let's hear from Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, obviously, everybody has to ask about 0-2 because we saw 0-2 last year for the Bengals. This is what he said about starting 0-2.
Well, we've done it before. Obviously, you don't want to start 0-2. It's not what we were planning on, not what you want to do at all. But, we're going to bounce back. That's what we do. That's all there is to it.
All right, C-Rob, you buying
C-Rob
this
has
year?
the worst poker face when we play these.
He's
like rolling his eyes on one. He's shaking his head on the other. There's just like that disappointed dad, like looking down. Okay, continue.
Yeah, C-Rob, she's right, and I'm buying what Jori just said. Are you buying that this year's 0-2 is the same as last year's 0-2? I know the answer to this based on the head move, but just fill everybody in on why.
Well, no, I mean, this is, and I hate to sell Burrow, right? Like, I'm a big believer in Burrow. I'm a big believer in Burrow being able to turn things around, dig people out of a hole. And I know all about the stat of last year. They started 0-2. Well, the difference is offensive line, not, at least from the cut-ups I watched, not looking great, okay? Burrow, convinced me he's healthy, right? I know he's back, and convinced me, obviously, look, there's the calf came into play at the end of this game too. That's what worries me here, is you have an 0-2 hole with a line that to me is not playing great football right now. a backfield that I'm not particularly excited about, and then a quarterback who just doesn't look healthy. And the quarterback especially is what worries me moving forward. Burrow and those receivers, that's what helped dig them out last year over the course of that, poor start. If he's not healthy, that is very alarming to me. And I start to question where are we in terms of the health meter? Like, is it in the red? Because if it's in the red, I don't know that you should put him back out there on the field and risk something truly catastrophic happening by the end of the season. And you're in the AFC North, by the way, which people can say whatever they want about the AFC North, but the Steelers just rip the Browns apart. Defensively, the Browns are not bereft of talent, and Baltimore is, I don't know, seemingly putting some things together. So it's a bad spot to be in for these Bengals.
The reason I'm selling it is because I think that last year we were seeing an offensive line that was taking time to get together. Joe Burrow was taking time to return from previous health issues, and we saw it in previous years. His second year, he was coming back from the torn ACL and MCL of his rookie year. Then last year, he's recovering from the appendicitis. But now he's got the injury now, and I was there in Cincinnati during training camp when they were asking him about injuries, and it happened to be the day before he strained his calf in practice, and he was like, look, you kind of have to work through training camp. I'm really happy to be back on the field for training camp, but I don't remember exactly when I got healthy in the regular season, he said when asked, because he said, you just drown it out and you go play. And I think that was because previously he was no longer injured. He was just finishing up the rehabilitation. Now he is actively injured. He said he's really sore. He might miss a game. And so to have him actively being injured, that doesn't mean you're 0-2 as part of your road to getting there. I think that you're really far off. And I also think it gets to a point where it might be a little late. Again, you've got Lamar Jackson and the Ravens seeming to put some things together, even if it's not perfect. And so you're not going to have an easy run in the division. You're not going to have an easy run in your conference. And if you get your act together in November, but you're too far behind, it doesn't really matter if you can play in January. You might be out by then.
I'd call it the trade deadline for T. Higgins, by the way. I'm just saying.
That's not if this thing goes off the rails, that's not a bad idea. I mean, because I agree with you guys. The biggest difference is that calf, right? And as much as we joke, friends don't let friends skip leg day. There is this part of playing quarterback has so much to do with
how often do you joke that?
Yeah. See, Rob, you're a big leg day guy. We power squatting there. I can.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fitz and I talk about leg day all the time.
Yeah.
I'm 5'9", 165 of pure power. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm literally two Fitzes.
Oh, man. But all that to say, playing quarterback is all about lower body balance, and we know that. And we talk about it all the time, right? You talk to quarterbacks, talk about how important feet, legs, and hips are to play in the position, right? And so you're telling me that a guy that is behind an offensive line that has required him to be shifty at times, even though they've invested a ton of money, is now going to have to worry about a key part of that chain. To me, he's going to be okay, but he's not going to be healthy all year. He's going to be healthy enough, but he's not going to be right. And if he's not all right, I don't know how you dig out of that hole. One team that doesn't necessarily have the same situation at quarterback, I'm trying to figure out the quarterback situation for, is the Falcons and Desmond Ridder. That being said, I came in with low expectations for the Falcons, and they've been in a couple of really close games. It's been an interesting start of the season for them. This is what Desmond Ridder said about the Falcons in close games.
Des, can you just talk about how that game was? It was so crazy. You guys looked like you were, kind of down for the count, and then you come back and you just kind of take us through.
No. Hold on. Never down for the count.
Okay.
Yeah, when you see the Atlanta Falcons out there, we'll never be down for the count.
Are the Falcons going to win a bunch of Jori? Am I wrong on the Falcons? Because I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm selling this. I don't think the Falcons are going to be good by the end of the year. Jori, am I wrong? Should I be buying the Falcons to win games?
Fitz, how do you feel when I read you this schedule that looms? Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay, the Atlanta Falcons are about to play the Lions, the Jaguars, the Texans, the Commanders, the Buccaneers, the Titans, stop me when you get scared, the Vikings, the Cardinals, the Saints, the Jets, the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Colts, the Bears, and the Saints. Not one of those games legitimately scares me. I'm not saying they're going to win them all. And I think there are teams like the Titans and the Vikings and maybe even Baker and the Bucks. Like, there are teams that are going to give them challenges, but they're not going to play the Chiefs. They're not going to play the Eagles or the 49ers. This schedule compared with what they just did, yeah, I don't think these Falcons are down for the count.
I don't feel good about my opinion suddenly. When you go through the schedule like that, suddenly, C-Rob, I'm a little scared. I've been very anti-Atlanta. I might be eating crow. You buying or selling?
I'm buying that they're going to win games. I mean, for 2 straight seasons, what have we said about Arthur Smith and the Falcons? That's probably going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Man, God, what a terrible team. Oh, my God, they're awful. And then he's won 7 games in back-to-back seasons, and it's felt surprising both times. Like, wow, how are they actually scratching out 7 wins despite not having a good quarterback situation, despite having, offensive line injury problems, despite, at one point they lose Kyle Pitts for, an extended period. I feel like he's held it together. And then I feel like Arthur Smith has also built it in the image of where he came from, which is the Titans. He wants to run the ball. He wants to have a tight end who can contribute the way, Jonnu Smith was when he was in Tennessee. He wants to have a dominant backfield. He turned Tyler Algier into a 1,000-yard running back like instantly. And now he's got Bijan Robinson back there. I think some of the frustration when I look at the Falcons is, especially skill position wise, I'm like, man, you have pieces to open up this offense. And then I look at Desmond Ridder and I'm like, you have the quarterback who does not feel like he can open up this offense. But that doesn't mean you can't win games. And as Jori said, the schedule is favorable. I think they play. It's not for the pieces. It does not feel like a sexy franchise. It just doesn't, because you're like, man, you would expect some more high flying, clips out of there. You would expect Bijan, to see kind of a Christian McCaffrey 2,000 yards type of season, given the talent that he brings to the table. So I think some of the disappointment that people have is kind of staring at the pieces and going like, okay, well, when are we going to see him open it up? Why isn't this a 30-point a game offense? And is it because of the quarterback? I thought, look, they showed some grit coming back. I think that the 2-0 start is mildly surprising, but it's not because of the talent there. It's gotten better, considerably better than a team that was, 7 wins last year and 7 wins the year before. So if they win 10 games this year, is that truly shocking considering how much better the talent has gotten? And they've actually settled on a quarterback who's been in the system and now knows what he's doing.
See, Rob, I need that to not happen. I'm just going to be honest with you. One of my dear closest friends is Harry Douglas. And Harry Douglas, every time the Falcons wins, just sends me the longest voice memo of him going, over and over and over again every time. I can't handle that 10 times this season. I can't handle the gloating. I can't handle I can't handle the hawk noise. Like
C-Mac too. We didn't even have to leave in
Charles
house
McDonald.
to find a Falcons fan.
yeah, that's right.
Don't worry, Fitz. I'm sure you'll have plenty of times when Las Vegas allows you to gloat in the same way this year.
You know what? I'm catching strays, and I'm just sitting here doing my look. Fine. It's fine. It's fine. You know what?
Also, I want you to know that when C-Rob was talking and he was like, the Falcons built, or Arthur Smith built this Falcons team in the image of where he came from, I was really having like Dabo Sweeney and like in the image of God, like thoughts coming into my head.
That'd be amazing if you walked in and he's like, in my image. Okay. The opposite of good is where the Bears are. We started the show with the drama. There are more things going on with Chicago, but we'll start here. Matt Eberflus was asked about the Bears' 12-game loss streak and whether or not it's starting to weigh on everybody in that locker room. This is what he had to say.
No, not at all. This is 2023, so there's a lot of guys in that locker room that weren't here last year, right? And a bunch of them. Free agents, drafts guys, a bunch of guys we picked. And it's a new football team, so we're getting the chemistry together. We're getting the guys together that are playing together for the first time in a season, and we will make that work. And the guys are very optimistic about that.
C-Rob, we'll start with quick here. Are you buying or selling that there is absolutely no carryover on this losing streak from last year?
No, I mean, I think I'm selling because I think there is carryover, but I think that a lot of it has to do with the similarities again, from one season to the next, offensively and expecting that sort of turnaround. Plus, I think there's we got little limited snapshots of what the offense could look like in the preseason, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, it looks like they've done it. They figured." And then we're like, "Wait, how far did he throw that pass to DJ Moore that DJ Moore took to the house and created an amazing clip? How many air yards was that from Justin Fields to DJ Moore?" So I'm selling this idea that there's no carry. I hate, why are these coaches saying this? That like last year never matters. You're not changing out every human being on your roster. You're not changing out every coach. You're not. And the next time a coach says to me, last year doesn't matter, I'm going to say, I don't ever want to hear you bitch about something a player did last year, or what they were last year, because every year they're new and they're shiny and they're fresh again and all their sins have been absolved. That's sort of what you're saying with these head coaches. And by the way, something's going on right now with defensive coordinator Alan Williams there. And it's not good. Like Eberflus won't even say whether or not Alan Williams is still employed by the Chicago Bears. They won't answer any question right now, essentially, about Alan Williams, other than to say he's away from the team. He continues to be away from the team, and they're really not commenting on anything else. There's a lot of crazy rumors flying right now on social media where it concerns Alan Williams. I've reached out to people, and I was told straight up, like, someone there was told, don't rumor monger, stay out of it. Just let everything unfold however it's going to unfold. And, we'll see where it goes. But it's odd. I mean, it's not even a red flag. It's like a Chinese military parade when the head coach says, I can't even tell you whether or not the defensive coordinator is still employed here. Remember how we're just talking about everything on offense? That's a big problem on defense.
It's stick there for a second, though, because we talk about distractions all the time, right? And players tell you they don't want to be the person that you have to answer questions about, right? And you start thinking about all the questions and the distractions, it just feels like everything's imploding. There's a point where it's the Titanic and everybody's trying to save themselves and nobody's trying to, nobody knows what's going on. Like, I don't know that I've seen something this early in a season where it just feels we're 2 games in. And it feels like the Bears are like, I wouldn't be surprised to find out the whole staff's gone tomorrow. Like, I'm trying not to be hot takey, like yelling to a mic guy, but C-Rob, it just feels like the entire thing is imploding.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look. If you've got a quarterback who's supposed to be your future, saying coaching, when people ask him why he's not, doing the things or playing the way that he feels like he ultimately should be as a quarterback, and he uses uses the word robot. And then you have the head coach being asked about the defensive coordinator, can't even say whether or not that guy's employed. This is a horrific start for the Bears. This is awful.
And by the way, the Packers might have their next quarterback to make matters worse for Chicago.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, like I look at the Lions. I don't think Jared Goff's the problem there, right? Okay, they've they're 1-1. They had a chance to be 2-0 going in, to start off the season. So I still feel like there's upside in Detroit. I don't think people are off that bandwagon right now. And like you said, Love's playing really, really well in Green Bay. And not just Love, there's also young players around him that they just drafted who are all coming out of the box playing well. And then, look, even the Vikings, disappointing, but that's also a roster where if you look at the actual talent on it, I will maintain that is, if I'm a veteran quarterback who wants to be traded in the offseason, they are loaded and ready to go if they get a veteran quarterback or who knows, if the wheels totally come off this season and they end up with that first pick in the draft. If Caleb Williams walks into there, feeling pretty good about them turning around fast. God, the Bears and the Jets, man. Jets fans and Bears fans need to have a meeting.
Jori, are you buying that there's no carryover from last year on this one?
Okay, here's what I'll say. 1, because I'm going to get technical, and 2, because C-Rob and I shouldn't agree on every single one. I'm buying that last year is not the problem. Do I think there's 0 carryover and it's completely irrelevant? No, but if I remember correctly, we ended last season with Luke Getsy getting a lot of praise for unlocking Justin Fields. And yeah, he wasn't there yet, but he had come so far. And maybe that was with running, but that's because he was getting the confidence and he was kind of seeing the field better. And now you get DJ Moore and some offensive linemen in. And I actually thought that the offense was headed in the right direction, if not yet there, at the end of the season. And now it seems like we've taken a step back. And I also think the reason that last year isn't the issue is they have so many issues this year through 2 weeks of the season that you don't need to go back to last year to look for the source of the problem. You barely need to go to Saturday.
I think that's where you're both sort of right in this to me because, well, let's go back to the Chargers conversation we had earlier. The reason I think there is carryover is the way they lost. And to me, some of the former players that I'm lucky enough to call friends and current players that I'm lucky enough to call friends talk about how it's almost like a marriage, like being in a locker room at times. You spend more time in that locker room than you do in a family, with your family during the season. Well, when you're going through stuff in your relationship and all of a sudden something happens that you've seen before, it triggers, right? Like there's a difference between we lost a close game again, I can't believe we did that, right? Versus the carryover can be different. That's all I'm saying. So when you're losing things the same way all the time, I think there is carryover. I think right now the fact is the Bears stink and they spent $90 million on what? So it's just a reminder for everybody to say, hey, we're going to tank this year because next year we got all this cap space and a high draft pick and it's going to be just fine. No, it's not. Like, organizations just play like it. I'm just oversimplifying. That's just making it that. Speaking of bad, the Broncos seem to be bad. This is what Sean Payton had to say about some of the miscommunication they're having on the offensive side of the ball.
There was a number of drives, where we're late with personnel, getting out of the huddle. We took a while. I mean, that's got to change. We had to burn timeouts in the first half, and I'm not used to doing. We got to be better, and I've got to be better. Russ has got to be sharper with getting the play out, and then we got to look at how much we have in. But, if we need to wristband it, we will. So
I'll ask you, Jori, you think there's any chance that this gets fixed this year for the Broncos? Because now we got coach throwing quarterback under the bus. I mean, we think this gets fixed?
Yes, I do think this can get better. I think that the biggest difference between Justin Fields and what Sean Payton were saying is Justin Fields is like, coaching is the problem. I'm being asked to be a robot. Not, I also need to get better. Whereas Sean Payton, if you actually listen to that full clip, is saying, I need to be better. Russ needs to be better. Here are some things we might try. And he's saying it in the heat of the moment of the emotion compared with 3 days later, which is what we saw from Fields. So I think that he is going to be determined to get better. And I think that also a coach saying that about his players, I mean, that's what Sean Payton's been doing since he got to Denver. He's been saying, you can't kiss babies anymore. You can't have your own offense. Like, I don't think that this is a different trope than what he was saying earlier in the season. Do you agree or disagree, C-Rob?
I'm going to buy it can get better, but there's a couple of things going on here. When I went through there, the thing that was so notable that I watched when Sean Payton was dealing with Russ in that offense was speed. Let's go. Tempo. Break the huddle, get to the line fast so that defensive players can't pick up their assignments, and spit out the play quickly, but also give yourself time to work at the line of scrimmage. It was just all about speed. Like, know the offense, know the details, operate at a high level, things will ultimately fall into place. When he talks about the wristband, if you talk about a wristband with a player, it means you are insinuating the quarterback does not know the offense the way that he ultimately should. When you hear coaches complain or they tell you privately, he goes to the wristband a lot. They're saying like he's not studying hard enough to pick up everything in the offense, or he doesn't know the verbiage well enough, or there's something missing in terms of the quarterback spitting it out, processing it quickly, and keeping you on time with the play clock. So he mentioned the wristband, potentially going to the wristband. And now another thing Sean Payton's going to do is he's going to shorten the verbiage. That's another thing too. When he says we're just going to have to shorten the verbiage, it's because he thinks Russ is spitting out the play too slow in the huddle, and that's slowing things down. And then you're getting to the line of scrimmage and the play clocks run down. You don't have an ability to make adjustments. You don't have an ability to identify what the disguise is, all these different things. So yeah, Sean pointed the finger at himself, but when you point the finger at yourself and you go, here are all the changes I need to make your world simpler, you're really kind of pointing to the other person. You're not saying I'm the problem. You're saying it's the other person who's the problem, not picking up all these different things. So you can make those adjustments. You can have Russ wear the wristband, and we can go back to that whole Seattle conversation about Pete Carroll being pissed that Russ wouldn't wear a wristband. And you can shorten the verbiage and all these different things. But ultimately, it just means you have a scheme where now you have to install all these little training wheels to keep the quarterback functioning on a timeline that you need. It's like when I went through there. Russ has to be faster. He has to know the offense. He has to be able to spit it out fast and find another gear. That's what Payton expects. That's what he's talking about right now. And Sean can help him do that. But I don't know if that's necessarily the best possible fit between a coach and quarterback.
C-Rob, does it surprise you that we're having this conversation? Because if you're having this with Zach Wilson, who's been like 2.5 years around, or Justin Fields, who's still newer last year when he's getting in a new offense, does it surprise you that a guy in his, 12th season is needing to have these issues?
Does it surprise me? I'm going to tread softly on that, because when Tom Brady got to Tampa Bay and he was first having some struggles there, Tom wore a wristband and he was going to the wristband early. And I remember that Saints loss that was horrific in that first year. A lot was made of, let's count the number of times where Tom goes to the wristband against the Saints. That is indicative that he doesn't know the offense. So, it can happen with the best of them. And, so to me, I will give Russ the grace that you can figure it out. You can learn it. And maybe you're still picking up on what Payton is bringing to the table. But I will say, from an expectation standpoint, it's not great that you had your past head coach who was suggestive that Russ wasn't moving fast enough at times, or didn't know the offense well enough and needed to wear a wristband and didn't want to. And that became an internal fight. It's not good to have two Hall of Fame head coaches basically kind of saying the same thing. At some point, you become the problem. Russ has got to take a bigger hand in ultimately fixing this.
There are two things that I keep thinking, and C-Rob, in the limited time we've worked together, I've been pretty consistent on this with you. I think the Broncos are going to be just fine long term, but I don't think that's going to happen this year. Sean Payton's going to need time to get his guy in. I don't think that's a hot take, but also what you just said I think is key. We need to remember that the coach that got the best out of Russ was Pete Carroll. And we talk a lot about Pete Carroll and his great defenses, and we talk a lot about Pete Carroll and the questionable Super Bowl call. But let's at least acknowledge that, through all of this, the shine keeps going over to what happened in Seattle, and I keep thinking, man, that was pretty damn good by everybody there. When you start thinking about what we saw from them. By the way, as pointed out here, Justin Fields addressing the media again in the locker room, wanted to make it clear he wasn't blaming the coaches. Quote, "I can play better, point blank." So that's awesome. Basically, I'm just saying, me and my weird analogies. I'm just saying, this is like, she walked in the room.
Convinced.
She walked in the room and she said, "What do you think of my dress?" And he said, "God, it makes you look fat." She cried. And then an hour later, he's like, no, it didn't make you look fat. Yeah. It just isn't flattering on you. It's like, you can't walk it back. You already said it made her look fat. You can't walk it back.
Buying Justin Fields' ability to play cornerback and backpedal like a monkey.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, man. There's one thing I can be sure of is that the rest of the year he ain't going to say anything, because now he has been burned through this process. C-Rob, tell everybody how they can support Terez Paylor's legacy. That's something that's important to this whole show. Tell everybody what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could go check out breakingt.com/Terez. That's a capital T in Breaking T. You can buy the All Juice tee or hoodie. We always like to honor Terez in the show, obviously the forerunner of the NFL podcast with myself. And remember that proceeds from that purchase go to support the Terez Paylor Scholarship at Howard University. You can also contribute to that scholarship directly, as well as the scholarship in his name at Missouri, if you check out our podcast description. So if you could, please do it.
I can't say it loud enough. I bought my hoodie. It is soft and snuggly. Rate, subscribe. Tell everybody how great this show is. Obviously, we're back tomorrow with Zero Blitz. You can follow us on Twitter. C-Rob is at Charles Robinson. Jori is at Jori Epstein. Our producer, just Stone, doing God's work, at SJ Rochelle. I'm at Jason Fitz. Be sure you're hanging out with us. Come back and check us out every single week. Be checking out all of the shows that Yahoo has for you in the app, wherever you get your podcasts, and, of course, on YouTube. Remember to get that review. We'll be back next Wednesday with more inside coverage. Thanks for hanging out with us.